I Like Gardening by Jean Hersey. Copyright 1941 by Jean Hersey. Chapter 13. Let Them Dig. A small, grubby fistful of extremely beheaded dandelions will enter your life some late spring day. Though dejectedly drowning in a glass of water much too deep for their short necks, they will still be the pride and joy of the child who picked them. Really lovely bouquets will supplant these as summer approaches if your child has a small garden of his own. More important still, besides having a very good time, he will learn a lot and turn another corner of your outdoors into a place of beauty. Children naturally love flowers and gardening, whether they are 3 or 13, and they take to the whole idea as quickly as a needle to a magnet. Their results are delightful in spite of, or perhaps because of, some of their unconventional and original ideas. Children like everything about gardens. They enjoy planting seeds, watering, cultivating, and picking the blossoms. And they also love the comfortable hop toad who catches his breakfast bug among the low-growing greenery, the gold and blue butterflies playing in the sunlight, and the gay crickets at dusk. An exquisite hummingbird seeking nectar among the columbines, or a mother robin feeding her young are exciting anywhere. But let these episodes take place in the child's own small domain, and they become unprecedented drama. So give your child a garden where he may entertain all these birds and insects, as well as raise and pick flowers to its heart's content. And vegetables too, if he wants. You've probably had bad moments when children and puppies have romped nonchalantly through your flower border, gathering choice blossoms as they went. But after all, why shouldn't they want to pick flowers? They see us grown-ups cut and arrange them for the house, and they are naturally imitative. It seems as if all the brightest, gayest blooms nod their heads in welcome when small children come out near them to play. They positively invite picking. Brilliant colored blossoms express a child's love of happiness and gaiety. With an urge to seize this cheeriness and color and make it their own, they accept the invitation of the flowers to pick and pick. As they break one off, they step on another, and on they go, prompted by good motives following a natural urge, and yet creating havoc. Give them a garden of their own, full of their own blooms which they can pick. Aside from being a definite interest during the summer holidays, they will not want to destroy beauty which they themselves have created. This respect for their own flower beds will extend to all borders, and that is where our gardens get a break. Let a child's garden be his own. Let him plant it, and care for it himself, and let it express his ideas entirely. Of course, you will be consulted. Youngsters have quite a lot to learn in making a garden, especially if it is their first attempt. You will probably have to teach them how to plant seeds and transplant seedlings. But if you show them and let them do it, it is still their project. And if you occasionally help combat a few of their more obstreperous weeds, all is not lost if you do it under their direction. When they assist us with odd jobs, indoors or out, we are the boss. So it seems quite fair that in their small domain they should rule, and how they love it. Plant the children's garden early. And incidentally, if you have lots of children, everyone will be happier if each has his own separate lot. First of all, choose a location. Select a place free from any plants at all. It's more inspiring to create a garden from definitely nothing than to start rather vaguely in this or that corner of the flower bed, which is already partly filled with something or other. If a spot is chosen in front of a hedge or shrubs, the greenery will prove a lovely background for the many gay flowers to come. In planning a garden for a child, the most important consideration is to have it small. Then young Peters, Jones, or Shirleys will not find it too arduous to do everything in it themselves. Design it, prepare it, plant it and reap the harvest alone and unaided. It's better for a child to have a patch 3 by 3 and take complete charge than to have one a dozen feet square and need grown-up assistance. Since the skill of the young in gardening doesn't always keep pace with their enthusiasm, and since their forgettery is long, they need a few things stacked in their favor to begin with. Lots of sun, good soil, plenty of fertilizer, and hardy varieties of plants and seeds to grow. Measure out these ingredients generously, and the results cannot fail to please and satisfy all concerned. When the location is decided upon, spread a 3-inch layer of fertilizer and peat moss on the surface of the earth and turn it under. A youngster could probably do this himself unless he were extremely young, in which case a slight amount of grown-up assistance would probably cheer him immensely. In any case, he could level it off himself, which is the next step. After this, let it settle a few days before the seeds are sown. This digging and fertilizing occupation will be a popular one if the garden dimensions are small and some nice new tools enter the picture about now. So perhaps a trip to the hardware store is in order. There are miniature sets of tools consisting usually of a rake, a hoe, and a shovel. Add to these a small fork. In selecting them, unless the children are very tiny, see that they choose the larger, sturdier sorts. Otherwise, the shovels soon bend at the neck in a dejected manner and become quite useless. If you want to be thorough, increase this collection by a regular-sized trowel for transplanting seedlings and a short-handled scratcher, grown-up size, for cultivating when they weed. Incidentally, the children will take great pride in owning all these bright new tools, and they won't have to borrow your favorites, which will make everyone happy. Ours are usually too big and clumsy for them to enjoy working with anyhow. If they have a special place to keep their implements, they will probably be surprisingly neat about putting them away. Perhaps a section of your own garden corner could be set aside, and their tools hung on the wall where they could reach them. They would also like red outlines to remind them about keeping everything in its place. There are 2 more accessories, both highly decorative in themselves, that every child enjoys possessing and using. A small wheelbarrow and a diminutive watering can. The wheelbarrow is useful in a million different ways. For moving small plants, bringing cut flowers down to the house, and carrying leaves. And the watering can revives many a thirsty seedling that would otherwise die of drought, especially if it depended on the youngsters lugging the clumsy family watering can around. A pair of good country overalls is also handy, from an artistic as well as from a practical viewpoint. After the ground is prepared, and while waiting for it to settle, the next big event is the garden plan, which the children will love making. It can be a simple and informal map. Not tediously accurate necessarily, not too serious, but indicating approximately where the flowers go and where a small path will run if there is to be one. All parts of the bed are not readily accessible for weeding and picking flowers. So if you are young and sometimes a little careless about stepping among small plants, a path, even if it consists of only 1 or 2 flat stones in the ground, is a help. Creating this garden plan will probably turn out to be one of the most popular rainy day projects you have yet advanced. For every child succumbs to the irresistible lure of paints, scissors, and paste, and that is the way to begin. Supplement these with large pieces of wrapping paper and some old flower catalogs, and success is already assured. After you have given a little assistance in figuring out the approximate dimensions of the selected site and helped draw to scale an outline of the area, the real fun begins. Don't get complicated or dull by trying to be too absolutely correct about this first step. A garden plan at a very small scale is beyond the ken of most children, but they will understand one that is scaled 4 or 6 inches per foot. Their wrapping paper plan will then be 1/3 or 1/2 the size of their actual garden. With a list of their favorite flowers or vegetables at hand, they can run through the catalogs until they find the most attractive colored pictures of each to cut out. With a lap full of brilliant paper blossoms, they can arrange and rearrange the garden to their heart's content. When the final decisions are made, with a regard for the varying heights of different plants, the paper flowers can be pasted on the paper garden and the whole divided into sections, outlined and labeled with paints. Should the youngsters want to edge their gardens with small rocks, they will probably enjoy importing them from a vacant lot in their wheelbarrows. Then there is the walk of flat stones. Either or both lend a decorative note to the garden plan. There are certain plants that are easy to grow and yield large returns with little effort. There are seeds that are attractive themselves because of their size or shape, and there are flowers with enchanting names. Many of these are found among the annuals, which grow quickly, are fairly sturdy, and bloom prolifically, usually from early summer to frost. The fact that they flourish in spite of adversity is important, because the seedlings may be drenched for several days and then forgotten altogether while the latest crop of baby kittens are arriving and being appreciated. Frequently, it is necessary for the young to dig up a nasturtium seed several times to see whether it has begun to grow. I don't blame them. It's thrilling to see a lumpy, luscious nasturtium sprouting, and if they have been generously planted, there will still be an abundance of bloom in spite of this drastic treatment. It's almost inevitable that by midsummer, since nature is kind to children and their gardens, they will have a tangled mass of varied flowers, a profusion of colors and scents, and probably a tomato and an ear of corn, as well as a colony of butterflies. The reasons why children want to grow certain specific plants and flowers are often amusing. Snapdragons are popular in our family. Bobby, who is 9, has a special fondness for picking the flower heads, snapping their mouths open and feeding them drops of water. Joan, who is 12 and likes fairy stories, must always have cornflowers in her garden because the seeds remind her of tiny elfin whisk brooms. A very accurate description. She must also have straw flowers because they last in the house all winter, and also because each seed is attached to a tiny downy parachute, and it's fun to see them blow about in the fall. She remembers one windy autumn day when we stood in the midst of a cloud of these snowy parachutes, each carrying its small brown seed to a new home. It was an enchanting sight, and remembering it, she would have straw flowers. Tim, who is 7, must have nasturtiums each year, as much for their nice crinkly seeds as their gay flowers, I'm sure. Each of the following has something to recommend it: rapid growth, charming seed, gay blossoms, general toughness, or all 4. Marigolds, for the seed is like a miniature Indian skiff with a golden prow and stern, and the flowers are gay, even on rainy days. Nasturtiums, for the twin crinkly leaves of this plant push up through the earth a short week after they are sown. Zinnias, for their rainbow-hued flowers, and for their seeds, which are like infinitesimal autumn leaves. The balloon vine, which children love for its interesting seed pod and its popular name, Love in a Puff. The canary bird vine, another grand climber. Its blossoms resemble a golden bird in flight. Snapdragons, straw flowers, cornflowers, with their whisk broom seeds and their blue blossoms. Cosmos, the more you pick, the more it blooms. 4 o'clock, which opens every day at tea time. Nicotiana, with its snowy white star-like flowers, an inimitable perfume. Scabiosa, with lacy, colorful blossoms. And finally, the carpet of snow alyssum, which makes the perfect border for all. A good selection for a garden about 8 by 5 would include alyssum, 6 inches, around the stones and path as well as the border. Chinese forget-me-not, 18 inches. cornflowers, 12 inches, scabiosa, 18 inches, zinnias, 2 to 3 feet, marigolds, 2 to 3 feet, cosmos, 4 feet. For a child of 5 or younger, a patch about 4 by 3 can, despite its Lilliputian dimensions, be quite lovely and colorful and provide picking flowers for a long season. In this tiny garden, it would be best to select only 3 flowers besides the alyssum border. Marigolds, zinnias, and cornflowers would be a good group. The cornflowers bloom early, and sometimes if the summer is hot and dry and the seed pods allowed to form, they deteriorate by early fall. But just then, their 2 neighbors, feeling the need of expansion, will willingly reach over and hide the area which the cornflowers have deserted. 1 package of seeds of each kind will be more than ample, but it's better to have a surplus of small seedlings to give away than to have too few. Youngsters are inclined to plant seeds too deeply. Nasturtiums and others of that size go about 3/4 of an inch underground and a couple of inches apart. Most other seeds want about 1/4 of an inch of soil over them. The tiniest of all are the snapdragons, which one merely stirs into the earth before patting it down. From the time the seedlings first appear until they have 3 or 4 leaves, they are dependent on moisture. If nature is not generous during this time, it will be well worthwhile for the children to water frequently. Page the small watering can, and sometimes they will adore wielding the grown-up's hose, adjusted for a fine spray. When the seeds sprout, twin leaves first appear, and from between these others emerge. The second batch are the true leaves. By them you recognize the plants, and the youngsters quickly learn the different varieties. When the true leaves have grown a bit, the plants should be thinned to stand about 6 inches to a foot apart. Choose a cloudy day for this process and encourage them to be as careful as possible of the delicate rootlets as they separate each seedling. These should be set fully as deep or a little deeper than before, and the dirt pressed firmly about their necks. After they are planted, soak them with a fine spray of water and continue to do so for several days until they start new growth. Then it is safe to relax and roll up the hose or put the watering can away, except for occasional dry spells later on. While all these seeds are germinating and growing, let the children have a few forget-me-nots, bachelor buttons, and pansies from a nursery, so that they may have something to pick immediately. From this time on, tiny bouquets in diminutive vases will begin to appear in the house. Keeping pansies picked assures almost perpetual bloom. There's just enough upkeep to keep the youngsters busy and entertained on many a warm summer morning in these small gardens of theirs. There are usually plants to be divided in the big garden, and how they appreciate our gifts of Sweet William or Spice Pink, or whatever we happen to be thinning. Whenever we are weeding, cultivating, or staking plants in the big garden, they will want to do the same thing in their small domain. These gardens satisfy any urge the children might have for tours of exploration into favorite seed beds. This used to happen occasionally before our 3 donned overalls and started to work in their own individual gardens. Now when they have friends come to play, they proudly display their plants. The guest child almost immediately catches the attitude of respect and holds our flowers in the same high regard, to the benefit of the delphinium and our other favorites. If you turn your children into gardeners, give them a free hand in carrying out their own ideas. A suggestion or 2 is not amiss, but don't be a wet blanket on any of their wildest schemes. One year I was planting corn. I suppose the crinkled hard seed appealed to Joan. Anyhow, she immediately decided she must plant some. So that season she had 1 hill of corn on the right as you entered her garden. Next to that was a tomato plant, and beyond a bed of snapdragons. A clump of cornflowers greeted you on the left, while nasturtiums crept among the stones. Zinnias and marigolds grew behind the cornflowers. Yet the whole garden was only 6 feet square. That was the year that Bobby's original ideas included a tomato plant that lifted its feathery leaves from the middle of a clump of zinnias, while petunias surrounded and climbed up his cornstalks. After all, we had given them their gardens, so why not let these gardens reflect their own ideas, not ours? When Bobby was a little bit older, he decided that he wanted a garden consisting entirely of vegetables. It happened at the time that he was a little weak in arithmetic. We decided it would be a fine summer project for him to grow fresh vegetables, which he could sell to us, and simultaneously, in the keeping of accounts, improve his ability to add. We steered him away from the more difficult vegetables, and those that needed to be started in a cold frame, or were slow and unexciting. But otherwise, we let him choose his favorites. We encouraged him, however, to select those which were not going to grow in the big garden, so that he would be the sole source of supply for certain things. It's wonderful what owning a lettuce monopoly will do for the ego of one small boy. Most boys in the neighborhood of 8 or thereabouts like the idea of earning money, especially if a second-hand bicycle or something similar may be purchased with the wealth amassed. I can think of no better way than in raising and selling vegetables to the family. Among those which are practical for such a project, always deferring to the youngster's preferences for the final choice, are parsley, radishes, beets, carrots, cucumbers, squash, string beans, corn. Young plants of red peppers and tomatoes may be bought later in the spring, and nothing is more enchanting than a thriving young vegetable garden completely surrounded by a row of ruffled lettuces. They look quite as nice as those up our front walk among the flowers. Let the arithmetic part enter the picture in the form of a small notebook full of lines, with a nice sharp pencil attached to it. If the original investment, which will probably be less than $1, comes from the child's own bank, the whole project takes on added importance. Planting time will come, of course, when you are sowing seeds in the big vegetable garden, and it will be convenient to give instructions at that time. A good place for a small boy's vegetable garden would be in a corner of the big one, and a row of stones or bricks around it makes a neat and dividing outline. An area 10 by 10 will grow quite a few vegetables, and yet not be too difficult for one youngster to keep weeded. While you are weeding and hoeing the big garden, your child will be very happy attending to his nearby. In early summer, the first crop of radishes will be ripe. Shortly after this, the string beans will come. If you have a grocery scale, you can weigh and handle the matter of pounds and price with this system. You will probably have moments of great yearning for the ultimate object desired, be it a bicycle or whatever, and at these times you will no doubt pay dearly for some things, but they will be fresh and delicious enough to be worth it. Besides, as you look out the window in the morning and see one small boy in overalls and big straw hat working among his plants or filling his basket with vegetables, you will realize that he is learning things not found in school books. For a youthful gardener develops the qualities that help make a serene and happy grown-up. That is the way of gardens and gardeners.